111 Minute Gallery is proud to showcase the visionary work of Lady Mags. Her latest exhibition, Home, explores the idea that home exists within us all, regardless of our physical location. Joining Lady Mags for this show is an impressive lineup of local and internationally renowned street artists. 111 Minute Gallery invites you to come down on February 7th for the opening of Home. Experience the vibrant energy of graffiti culture meeting fine art, ultimately reminding us that true home resides in the heart. Go to 111minute.com/events for more info.
Every professor I had in school was just like hard news. And I was like, I want to write a feature story about a musician or like somebody's life story, you know, and it was like, no.
That was Ashley Graham, marketing manager and art director at the Fillmore. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco, a podcast about artists, activists, and small businesses that make this city so special. In this episode, we meet Ashley. Originally from Spokane, Washington, Ashley traces her life and music back to Janet Jackson, Sammy Hagar, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and Stone Temple Pilots. Hear how music led her to Seattle, where she worked for a venue and helped to put on music festivals. Then, a phone call from the Fillmore in San Francisco changed everything. Here's Ashley Graham.
I grew up in Spokane, Washington, and my mother is a native of Spokane, Washington. Both of her parents were, God, I have no idea where they're from, actually. I'm not even going to lie and make it up. My dad jumped around a lot, was born in Missoula, Montana.
Oh, yeah.
Ended up in Golden, Colorado because my grandfather worked for Coors. Lived in Virginia at one point, bounced around quite a bit. And then my grandfather took a job in Spokane when my dad was, I think, going into his senior year of high school.
Okay. Also a beer job or?
I think it was Kaiser Aluminum up there. So it was he was an engineer. So he built machines. I mean, he was an incredibly intelligent person. He has all these crazy patents for inventions and stuff that he made. He was just some people just have that brain, right? Mm-hmm. Where they just their brain is thinking about 5 things at once, and they just are finding solutions to problems that I wish I had.
Okay.
I wish I had that.
That nut fell far from the tree. It's okay.
I didn't get it.
It's okay. You have your talents. We'll get to those later.
We'll get to those, I hope. Yeah. So that's what landed him in Spokane. And
so your dad was, you said, about 18 or toward the end of high school?
I think he was 17 going into high school, the worst possible time to move probably mm-hmm. when you're going to be a senior. Mm-hmm. All new people, new city. And they met when my mom was 22.
Okay.
One of those classic 70s marriages where they knew each other for 5 months and then just got married.
That's a long time for
and
back
they're
then.
Still married.
Okay, yeah.
So they've been married, I think it's going to be it's going to be 50 years in 2 years. It was 76.
Yeah. Okay.
That seems crazy.
It does.
I'm an 80s baby, and so I'm one of those people that's wait, the 70s were 30 years ago? Is that right?
Right.
That's...
Yeah. We'll try being from the 70s, Ashley.
Okay. Yeah. Well, sorry.
Do you know how they met?
Yeah. My mom worked at a burger place called Bimbo's.
Yes. I love
that. And my dad would come in. Well, actually... I'll say that he originally started coming in with his now ex-wife.
Oh, okay.
And then one day he showed up without her.
Yep.
And time went on, and finally he asked my mom out on a date, and the rest is history, really. Yeah. Kind of weird, but that's that's how it goes. So life is weird.
Yeah, it is. And you gotta move on, and what better way to help you move on than getting a burger?
Than just a cute gal behind the burger counter.
So he was married previously?
He was, very briefly, very, very briefly.
And he have brothers or sisters?
I have him?
Do you?
I have one sister. No.
Okay.
Thank God.
Yeah.
I think that would have made it weird.
Okay.
No, I have an older sister, Erin, who is 2.5 years older than me.
Okay.
So we have a classic, what I think is a classic older sister, younger sister sort of vibe.
Okay.
She hated me, I think, when we were growing up, and now we're really close. So
Yeah.
we came full circle. I was like really sick as a kid. I had really bad asthma, and so I think it was just like I was a drag to be around, and I got a lot of attention.
Yeah.
So
You were a lot.
I was a lot.
For
I had
her.
like a bad temper when I was a kid too, so I
Well,
think
you
she
had
was just
asthma.
like,
You were
I'm just
sick.
gonna like stay away from her,
Right.
like avoid her at all costs. But
Yeah.
it's funny because I have a 7-year-old niece, and now my sister is like telling her stories about when we were kids and like what a pain I was. I'm like, but I'm great now, right? That's where it goes. Like the story always ends with me being awesome now. So
You have to be not good to then get through it to be good.
yeah, you
just
know, we
makes you
have all this
better.
history now. It's such a rich history we have with each other. And I mean, I think also like we're very aligned in like who we sort of became somehow, even though we were like, I would say very different as kids. We somehow kind of, you know, we're very, like she works at Notre Dame and teaches.
Like the one in
international-
Indiana?
Yes.
Okay.
They live in South Bend, Indiana.
Okay, yeah.
They were in Philly for 10 years, and she teaches in international relations.
Oh.
And so we like couldn't be more different in terms of our careers, but like I think our personality and like the way that we view the world, certainly our politics, like are very aligned. And so at the end of the day, like those are the things that like, you know, keep us pretty tight at this point,
Sure.
especially with the family that surrounds us sometimes.
Oh, sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We're all going through that.
Eastern Washington, you know?
Yeah. I have my own comments that I'll leave out. It's
I
beautiful.
really love the face you just
part
made.
of the world. Beautiful.
Yes.
Naturally.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said you grew up your parents got married in 76. You're the second kid. You grew up you did not hesitate. You're like, I grew up in the 80s.
Yeah. Born in 1983.
Okay.
I think it was a great time to be alive.
Look, I was already kind of like, I went to see Return of the Jedi. It's like the first thing I thought when you said 83.
Okay.
I saw it.
That was
'cause
83?
I was like 10, yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I talk about this a lot because I think like I particularly really appreciate being of the generation that I am because, and I don't want this to sound like, ugh, but you know, like we grew up without computers and phones and things like that. And like, it really, I think being part of a generation that like experienced that starting is like, certainly they say millennials are like the most screwed of any generation because we've done all these, we've had to exist in this. But I think there's some benefit to that, especially now, seeing younger generations come up that have always had that, or you know, I think it's like really nice to remember not having a phone and like not having the world at your fingertips.
I'm just going to say it makes us more resourceful.
Yeah, no, I have
us
said this before. It's like, and I don't know who I said it about, and I probably shouldn't say anyway, but it's like the idea that like in order to find stuff out when I was a kid, I had to be like, Mom, can you drive me to the library? Go up to the desk at the library and be like, I'm researching whales and I need to know this. Like you had to put in quite a bit of effort. And now it's like, do on your phone, right?
Yeah.
Which is great for so many reasons.
Yeah,
but
but
I
it
think
also...
like you said, the resourcefulness and like the like wherewithal and the like ability to like examine and think critically, like, and certainly that exists in younger generations.
Sure.
But I think just like it's a different, like we have a different kind of protocol for it in our brains. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. I personally like really appreciate that that's still what my brain has as a reference point.
Totally.
Because I think it's I don't know, like I use it a lot, right?
Well,
like I have to, like that hustle,
Totally.
I think. And I don't need to use it now to figure out what whales do, but I use it in other ways, and my brain is like always thinking in those, you know, in those parameters. Sort
Right.
of, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe not to a T, but like the libraries themselves and the books therein are like well researched and probably not bullshit,
Yeah.
not disinformation.
Yeah, there's
so
no
that.
like weird AI blurb at the top of them that just like is whatever the internet agreed upon.
Yeah.
So
besides doing reports on whales, what else
I
were?
never
what
actually
other?
did a report.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, shit.
I did a report on elephants, but I don't know why whale came to me. You know, just a random thing. Maybe I need to look into it.
Besides being into animals, what other kinds of things were you doing as a kid in Spokane, Washington, in the '80s and maybe early '90s?
I don't even remember. I played Barbies a lot. That's what I had like a younger cousin who's 3 years younger than me, and so like I overlapped. Like my sister and I played together as kids, and then like I got so into Barbies, and then when my sister was like, I'm over this, then I was like, hey little cousin, and then I had like just stretched the timeline out. So I was fortunate in that sense. Listened to a lot of music. It was the 80s. Loved Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson in particular. First concert ever, Janet Jackson.
Oh, shit.
The Gorge Amphitheater, August 10th, 1994.
I was gonna say, which tour was that?
The Janet Tour.
Janet Tour. Okay.
Yeah.
And so definitely by the '90s, probably CDs, but earlier cassettes. And
Actually,
vinyl?
there's a really great story about me going to kindergarten and having to get on the bus to go to school and just like refusing, just being like way too afraid. I had a stay-at-home mom and I had asthma, so I was like, hesitant to leave. And my mom took me to the school bus and I like spread eagle across the front door of the bus. Was like, I'm not doing this. And of course my sister, who, already had a beef with me, was like, don't know her. So my mom like took me home and said, you're not going to school today. And I was like, why? Like, just drive me over there. Like, I'm good. She was like, no, you have to go on the school bus to go to school. That's what happens. So I ended up getting those like classic incentive like sticker. And when I got like, I don't know how many stickers it was for going to school on the bus, I got Janet Jackson Rhythm Nation cassette tape.
Oh, God.
Which I still have. So that was
just
like
for going
that was
to
like
school?
the pinnacle, and I was like
damn.
5, right? It was like, oh my God, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. So, so I didn't want to go to school, but I did really want that cassette tape, I guess. So it made it all worth it. But yeah, cassette tapes for sure. We also did a lot of like singing into recorders. You know, like we would sing songs.
Who's we?
Me, my sister, and my cousin.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to think of like some of our jams, like
like
Richard Marx. I think was one of our go-tos, like whatever my mom listened to, probably.
Sure.
Some of those 80s classics.
It's like a weird version of proto or early karaoke, kind of. Or like
I like lost my nerve though because I don't do karaoke, but we used to. I think it was just it was the 3 of us in a room with a closed door, and it didn't matter
tape
like
recorders.
what
They were life though.
We still have. My mom actually converted an old cassette onto a CD, and it's like
good.
I'm literally like 2.5 or 3 years old. I have a horrible cold. I'm like coughing the whole time, singing like preschool songs, and I'm like, is this what this was?
Oh my God.
I remember this being so much cooler.
Yeah. So if my math is right, you just mentioned Janet Jackson 94, so that would have been like right as you're getting into high school or so. No, not yet. Not yet.
I was 10.
Okay, so, but then a few years later, you're getting into high school, kind of like what were you into in high school? I feel like that's where most people start to figure
certainly.
something
It's
out.
interesting because I always say too that like I'm still into the stuff I was into in high school and college, right? Like it's like I think also like being someone who went into music as a career, my taste just sort of dropped off at a certain point. Like I consumed it for so many years, and then like once I started to work in it, it just was like, yeah, I guess I still like the Strokes. I think like I don't know, I don't even know anymore. I'm just at shows all the time.
Also, just a function of age, I think.
Totally. I actually just saw a meme that was like every millennial listens to one of these CDs, and it was like Linkin Park Hybrid Theory or like whatever it was. It was like I was like, yeah, that's me. Yeah, in high school, it's kind of like I think when my music taste really started to like kind of hone in on like who I became.
Mm-hmm.
I was really into classic rock in high school, which is
Okay.
so strange. Got really into Kiss,
Mm-hmm.
mostly because the movie Detroit Rock City came out.
Mm-hmm.
Loved Edward Furlong,
Mm-hmm.
still do,
Mm-hmm.
kind of. Old Edward.
I don't even know
Let's
his
say I love
name.
old Edward Furlong still,
Sure.
not current Edward Furlong.
I have
Google
no
it.
idea what he's
You don't want to know.
Oh,
You don't
okay.
wanna
We
know.
won't touch that.
So I was really into Kiss. I was really into like Aerosmith. I had like Poison CDs even. Don't even ask me where it came from. I don't know.
All good.
And then in 1999, when I was 15, my sister and I won tickets to see Sammy Hagar.
Okay.
And
This is post his Van Halen.
yeah, it's like it's really like it was the second album he released, like post Van Halen.
Okay.
Called Red Voodoo.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea what it was. I didn't. My sister came home from like swim practice and was like, "Hey, the radio station's giving away tickets at the car dealership," you know. So we just like drove there, and nobody else was there to win the tickets. And so,
Sorry.
yeah, like super,
just
like
what would
don't call
happen.
in, just show up, and
That's
we'll
what
put
would
your name in
happen.
a raffle. And we won tickets. And since no one was there, we like waited and won 2 more, and we took our parents.
Okay.
And it was like downtown Spokane in this beautiful park there, Riverfront Park in the Lilac Bowl. So it was outside. It was August, I believe it was August 3rd, 1999.
Okay.
And it was just it was so good.
Yeah.
Like it was so good.
Yeah.
And I think I was like teed up for it in the sense that I was already listening to classic rock and I was already open to like middle-aged white guys singing, you know, like it was already sort of my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But the relationship that he had with his fans was what I think really like drew me in. And it was amazing to me that someone, I mean, he's 77 years old now, so this was like 25 years ago. Like he wasn't even an older man, quote unquote, at the time. But he had this devotion to these people that, you know, had been following him for this long. And he put, like, if people threw hats on stage, he put the hats on. And if they threw blankets on stage, he tied them around his waist and he put on jersey, you know, like anything. And then he'd sign it and throw it back to him after a song or two. You know, like, it was just this very unique thing. And I loved it. Actually, my whole family was, like, very intrigued and like, enthralled. But I next leveled it, and I
Sounds like it, yeah.
went home the next day. This is probably surprising. My love of Sammy Hagar comes as a surprise to many people. But I like went to the store the next day and bought the CD,
Yeah.
and then a week later I bought more CDs, and it just became. It was like, this is my new thing.
Yeah.
I bought a Sammy Hagar shirt on eBay
Because that already
because that was like
existed?
the only place you could buy stuff like
Okay.
that. And it became like my identity, really.
Was it just you? Did you have friends who maybe were at the show? Okay, it was just
No,
you.
I didn't have friends. Who
So
were in it.
basically, it was like Barbie,
I mean, he
Janet,
was like, you know,
Sammy.
Yeah, sure.
There's like a-
yeah, that
yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And also, you know, like I would say as defining moments in high school and like in my character, like certainly Sammy plays a part in that. But I also then, like, I think a year and a half-ish later discovered Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which I would say, let's give me a little credit. I think that did a lot. It
Sure.
steered me in maybe bigger ways.
Movie or live?
It's interesting because my path to Hedwig was because I was a huge Stone Temple Pilots fan.
Okay.
Go with me here.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott Weiland would, on occasion at that time, perform like in a Hedwig outfit on stage.
Yeah.
And so I was just like a super fan following their like, you know, website posts or whatever it was. It wasn't a blog because that didn't exist yet.
MySpace?
And
No.
was like, wait, what is this? Like, what's
Yeah.
this blonde wig? What are
Yeah.
these frilly panties or whatever? And then there was an incident with Scott, as there were many, where he had to sort of drop off the tour, and the rest of the band actually ended up backing this actor, Michael Cerveris, in Hedwig in LA.
Oh, wow.
And there ended up being a photo shoot and like all these different things. And I was just like, what is this? Right. And so I was kind of vaguely aware of it. And I don't know exactly where the timeline lines up with like the movie coming out, which the movie I think was released in the summer of 2001.
Okay. That sounds
And
right.
so we were going to Seattle. My mom and my sister and I were going to Seattle. My sister loves Stevie Nicks.
Okay.
We're weird.
No,
we're past our like. Wait, what's the right phrase? Not ahead of our time. We were both obsessed with people in an older demographic. But we were going to Seattle to see Stevie Nicks, and I found out that Hedwig was like just being released in Seattle at the Egyptian Theater on Capitol Hill, and so we all went, and it was like my mom and my sister and I, as well as my aunt and her friend. Both very Catholic. We all just went in, and I was like, I don't know what this is. Like, let's just do this. And it was weird, and everyone was like a little uncomfortable. But I walked out of that theater like with my brain blown wide open, and my heart exploded, and it was such a big moment for me.
Not weird for you. You're like,
not weird for me. I was like, I
amazing.
think this is my, like it was just, it made so much sense to me. I always say that Hedwig like opened my heart and filled it with not just compassion and love and acceptance of others, but an intelligence, like an emotional intelligence that I think is so like in that film and in that story and also in the people who created it. And it really, I think, opened my eyes to something that I certainly hadn't experienced in Spokane, Washington, something that I knew, like you see Scott Weiland in frilly panties enough that you're like, I think the world is bigger than what I've experienced. But I think Hedwig for me was just like such a changing, like a turning point for me in terms of like what I accepted and wanted of the world around me.
And I'm guessing by the year that you were a senior, maybe, or were you already
it was
out
like
of...
probably right before my senior year of high school because it was
Got
it
it.
was the summer. I think summer before that.
Okay.
So yeah. So I went back to Spokane and I was like, you guys, no, it was a hard sell to my friends in Spokane when I was like, it's out on VHS. Let's all rent it and watch it. But it continues to be really a guiding light in my life. And I have seen John Cameron Mitchell perform the songs of Hedwig so many times. He did it on Broadway 8 years ago. I went for 2 weeks and saw it a million times. Like,
When are you going to get him to do it here?
I know. I actually I saw him in Berkeley a couple, like maybe it was pre-pandemic, who knows. And I was like, just so you know, I work at the Fillmore. You're welcome anytime. And he was like, it's such a stage production. I don't know how we'd shrink it down. And I was like, just do it.
Yeah.
It's the Fillmore. Don't you want to play at the Fillmore? Come on. So maybe someday.
Okay, so you're a senior in high school. What's next?
I was like really obsessed with being a screenwriter.
Okay.
That was really what I wanted.
While still in high school?
Yeah. In fact, I like very much was like, I'm over this place. I started writing scripts and stuff, like, some self-righteous child kind of like vibe. And I just was like, this is all I'm going to do. Like,
were they movie scripts or TV? Or
who knows what they were.
Yeah.
I hope they're gone because I don't ever want to find them.
But
whatever they were.
Drama.
Yeah. Like, family stuff, high school stuff. I don't know.
Right.
And I was reading a lot of scripts. I had one English teacher that was just like so aligned with me and like very encouraging, which I think was huge. I just was telling the story the other day, and I won't name names, but I do want to shame this one person in my life who was my high school counselor. Okay. And I had this English teacher I was super tight with, and he was like studying to be a vice principal or like going through training to be it. And so he was shadowing the vice principal for the week. And I went in to like meet with him at lunch one day, and he was sitting in my counselor's office. And my counselor had been like out around whatever. And my counselor, I'm trying really hard not to say their names, was like, came in, and this teacher was like, you know Ashley? And this guy looked at me like, sure, yeah, okay. And my teacher was Mr. Gordon, Danny Gordon, A+ guy. He was like, "You must know Ashley. Like, she's in my AP English class. She did this. She did this. She did this. Like, don't you know she wants to be a screenwriter? Don't you know she wants to, you know?" And this guy was so like mortified, kind of like, it was just
headlights.
like, well, that's great.
Oh.
And he left, and Mr. Gordon was like, "What the fuck was that?" You know,
Right.
Not those words. And I was like, "Yeah, that guy has no idea who I am." And
Guy's not good at his job.
I mean,
as an adult, I can
so
say that.
focused on like pep rallies and jocks and all that. So, you know, like he was like the cheerleader for
But the counselors are supposed to be like, no, you need to take this class.
Yeah,
and this
like
class
the
and this
kid
class.
who really wants to go to college
But he
and
was all
needs to be guided.
extracurricular.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, he bummed me out. So anyway, but I had Mr. Gordon. He was a great resource. He was super encouraging. I ended up going to Loyola Marymount for a year and taking a screenwriting class. Hated Loyola.
Can you remind me / tell people where that is?
Los Angeles,
in Los
California.
Angeles, yeah. That's what I thought. Okay.
I was there for a year, and it just wasn't a very good fit. So I ended up at Seattle U, studying some cross between journalism and communications.
Okay. So writing.
Because I was sort of like, oh, if I graduate with a degree in screenwriting, then I'm what? I'm just a screenwriter, but I don't really have a screen. Like, so then when I moved, basically, obviously Seattle, you didn't have a screenwriting program, and so I was basically like, what's a job that's a writer, but that's a job? Like when I graduated, I'm like, oh, I'm a journalist. Okay, you know, like, and then I. Which is funny because speaking of like being on interesting timelines, you know, journalism now, when you study it in college, is like an entirely different thing than it was when I went.
I did it 20 years ago as well.
Yeah, where you're like hard news and like the pyramid or whatever. No, the triangle. What was that? The format where you like start broad and narrow down or whatever it was. Like all these things that I'm like, oh, how
nut
quaint.
graphs and lead graphs and all that shit.
It's not like now they call it media studies and you have to be a videographer, I think. Like it's an entirely different thing. Which I really think I was like maybe one of the last couple years of the like holdover journalism.
It's probably because we didn't all have smartphones back then.
Right. Yeah.
Probably the biggest reason.
I mean, every professor I had in school was just like hard news. Yeah. And I was like, I want to write a feature story about a musician or like somebody's life story, you know, and it was like, no, like you gotta go find out where that traffic accident was, right? About it. You know what I mean? Like it was just so it was very clear to me like halfway through college that it wasn't really like what I was gonna do.
But did you like Seattle?
I really did like Seattle. And when I was in college, I think that was the first time like music started to sort of take over in the sense that I got into the Strokes at Loyola Marymount, which would have been 2002, I think.
Okay.
And I always say the Strokes felt like sort of the first band that I listened to that like you could be friends with.
Oh yeah,
like
that's
important. I mean, maybe they were like private school kids that you kind of knew, but you know what I mean. Like they had that appearance, and it was just sort of like they just seemed like 20-year-old dudes, right? There wasn't a ton of like ego to it. It was just sort of what it was. They didn't seem like they wanted to be famous. They had, you know, like it just. And I think for me, it was sort of like maybe inadvertently sort of showed me like, oh yeah, like this is more accessible than I think it seemed before.
Right.
And so in getting into that era of music, really like quite obsessively, like I loved the Strokes in a way that I don't think I'll ever love a band ever again. Or I don't even think I have it in me to love a band like that. The energy for it.
Right.
It was like I started going to local shows in Seattle, and I started being friends with local bands, and I started.
It's good music town.
Yeah,
really
and it's a small city, so like it's very easy to go to everything available to you, really. And so I was going to shows constantly. I started a website. Again, pre-blog, so it wasn't a blog. Yes. It was HTML, and I had to update it that way.
It was like GeoCities or one of those?
Was it GeoCities?
Yeah.
Oh, don't shame me. It was a GeoCities.
There's no shame, dude.
Yeah.
Just early internet.
Yeah. And it was so much work, actually. But started reviewing shows and taking terrible photos at shows and like doing interviews with bands, and then ended up like with a couple of like-minded folks in college who also wanted to contribute to it as well. And you know, just like it kind of grew and grew, and really like the purpose of it when I was doing it was like, this is journalism, like this will be my resume, right? Like I'll get a job based on the fact that I can do all these things. But what it actually ended up doing was really creating this path into like seeing what music was and how it worked. So I was working with
like the business,
publicists,
you mean? Or,
and like,
right.
yeah, and labels, and
Right.
getting mailed CDs to review, and like all these different things. And what it kind of inspired was like, oh, I could do that stuff. Like maybe I'll flip this and then I'll like work with the bands and do that, you know, like, and really it happened slowly and unexpectedly, but that was sort of the direction that took. And so while I was doing that, then I want to say my senior year, I did 2 internships, one at what was House of Blues and is now Live Nation up in Seattle, and another at Barsook Records, who at the time was like Death Cab's. Death Cab had like just left. Barsook had like Mates of State and the Long Winters and Viva Voce and like
Mates of State
Rocky
from here.
Flotado. Yeah, it was a
Originally,
really
yeah.
good label. And I worked with their in-house publicist, and at the time what that meant was like, you know, mailing CDs in bubble envelopes and that kind of stuff. But again, like all that stuff just sort of like helped me kind of figure out which lane I wanted to end up in.
Right.
And then I briefly lived in LA again after college, working at an independent PR company before the Seattle office for Live Nation was like, hey, somebody's leaving. We need you back. So I moved back up to do that.
Okay. And then how did you come here? What's that story?
I was in our Seattle office for like 5.5 years, which it felt a lot longer, but I think it's because 20s are so like formative and like feel, right? Like everything feels so important and like.
Well, our brains are still forming, I think, right?
So it was very formative in the sense that like we did a festival up there called Sasquatch at the Gorge, and it was every Memorial Day weekend. And I, as an intern, like worked Sasquatch for the first time and was like, I love this. Like it was just, it became this thing, and it like, I stayed for so much longer, I think, because I loved working Sasquatch. We would hire a PR team out of New York every year, and I was like the one person working with them and like approving photographers and approving press outlets and coordinating on-site stuff. And like, it's just like, I loved it so much. And it was very hard to leave when I did. But other than that, like the Seattle office was very much like large shows, arenas, amphitheaters. We had full seasons at the Gorge and White River Amphitheater. We did shows in Portland, Spokane sometimes, Boise, Idaho. Like it was a big market, primarily Seattle, obviously. And it's easy to say now, I guess, but I got this call from my former boss here at the time, who was basically like, I have this job open. You sound good. Like, what's up? What do you think of the Fillmore?
That was the Fillmore's Ashley Graham. Check back next week when Ashley will share her story of moving to San Francisco and talk about the history of the Fillmore. Part 2 drops next Tuesday wherever you get podcasts. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Our contributing producer is Erin Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 7th season, we have more than 220 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If possible, please, please, please rate and review the show. I want to know what you think. Follow us on Instagram and Threads at storiedsf, and reach out to us there or email us at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Be extra careful crossing the street, and keep being wacky, creative, and kind out there. See you next time on Storied San Francisco. We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcast.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.